everyone, and welcome back to What a Barb, a Polin podcast. I'm Obs, and this week I'm joined by Lecky, Beans and Veg as we continue our Polin rewatch of Season 1 of Bridgerton. This week we'll be breaking down everything Pen and Colin from Season 1, Episode 6, Swish. But before we get started on the episode, we'll go through the breaking crumbs of the week. Veg, what have you got for us this week?
So coming at you with the crumbs, The Shape of Things, Luke's play, has now been released for streaming on the original theatre company to residents based in the UK and the EU. Very exciting. And fans are thoroughly enjoying catching up with the show, so it's keeping everyone busy. I've seen lots of chatter.
Yeah, we both saw it in person, but it's really fun to watch everyone else catch up and then to watch it again because it like zooms in on all their expressions, which is really fun to see.
Good times. As we mentioned last week as well, Luke Thompson's play A Little Life played its last performance on Saturday the 5th of August. So Nicola Coughlan went to support him at the last show alongside Rupert Young, who fans will be familiar with as Lord Featherington in Season 2 and super familiar to me and Obs as the lovely Sir Leon in Merlin.
We're always Merlin fangirls foremost.
And also we both saw that play, so we're really hitting the London theatre scene. Speaking of Nicola, we talked a few weeks ago about her upcoming movie Seize Them, which was due to release on August the 18th, but it's just been postponed until October the 20th, which is the new date we've been given, so we'll keep you updated on that. It's been announced that Season 3 director Andrew Ahn will be appearing as Trailblazer honoree at the Korean American Stories 13th Annual Gala in October in New York. Very well deserved.
Yes, so as Veg said, Andrew Ahn will be directing 2 episodes in Season 3. Really lovely to see him get some recognition, and we'll bring you any news, any kind of updates that he brings from that as he shares his experiences in the industry.
Yeah, exciting. In other Bridgerton actor news, our lovely Series 1 and Series 2 Francesca Ruby Stokes will be appearing on stage in London this autumn. She'll be playing Mia in the new production of That Face at the Orange Tree Theatre in Richmond, and that will run for about a month from 9th of September to 7th October. Hop on the District line and go and have a look if you're around. In strike news, the WGA marked its 100th day of striking this week, which was somewhat of a milestone because I think that made it longer than the previous longest writer strike. This is a shameful milestone for the AMPTP. It has been announced that the WGA and AMPTP will be resuming talks on Friday the 11th of August. As we're recording these crumbs, we don't know yet how those talks have gone, but we hope that the writers' demands will be met in full as soon as possible. If you'd like to donate to support strikers, we will be linking the Entertainment Community Fund in our show notes, which is providing emergency financial assistance to those impacted by both the WGA and the SAG-AFTRA strikes.
Thanks for the updates, Veg. We'll see you next week. But as for now, we'll get started on our episode rewatch.
Yay!
Thanks for that. But now it's time to get started on our rewatch. This is a pretty big episode, so we're going to jump straight in. Is everyone ready though? I feel like there's a lot of pain in this episode. Are we all mentally prepared?
No, I'm on my period, so I cried when I watched this episode.
At least you watched this episode though, Beans.
Yeah, that's true. I did watch the episode.
To kick us off, Lady Veg, wherever you may be, can you give us a summary?
Dearest gentle listener, as Daphne and Simon begin settling into married life at Climbden through a montage of marital moments, Daphne tries to adapt to her new role as Duchess. Colin announces his engagement to Marina, much to the surprise of the Bridgerton family. A pig competition causes upset and financial ruin amongst villagers. Colin and Marina plan their elopement to Gretna Green. Daphne uncovers a shocking truth about Simon and takes drastic action. Lady Whistledown reveals the truth.
Let's start as we mean to go on then, and kick off the episode watching Penelope getting her heart ripped out. We're at a rather poorly attended garden party. We've got the Featheringtons, the Bridgertons, other people of the ton, and Colin is there stood chatting with Marina. Pen is kind of lingering around the side quite sadly, and there's this moment where she spots Eloise. It's been 2 episodes since they've had the big falling out, and they're still not made up with each other. You can tell they're really starting to miss each other now. Before we can get too sad about Pen and Eloise, we're going to be interrupted by the sound of a clinking glass.
A ding, 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 ding.
That's exactly how it was. And we have Colin himself saying, "Pray, may I have everyone's attention."
No, you may not. I'm ignoring you.
Well, sadly, you're alone in that because everyone else turns to look at him and Marina. The Bridgertons kind of look a bit perplexed. They don't really know what's going to come out of his mouth. Anthony already looks sort of preemptively angry. I imagine that he spends most of his time just waiting to be pissed off by one of his siblings. And today, it's going to be Colin. Colin declares that he would like to make a small but rather important announcement. Well, he's got some happy news to impart. How wonderful for us all. What's he got to tell us, Veg?
Thank you. Again, I will be using the voice in the audiobook and not in the show. I have asked Miss Marina Thompson to be my wife, and she has accepted.
Just exactly what we wanted to hear. I like how Colin kind of turns the Featheringtons halfway through because he clearly had forgotten to ask them the permission to marry Marina before that. But he doesn't have to worry because the Featheringtons are thrilled with the news. A stunned but delighted Portia rushes up with everyone. Everyone gathers round to congratulate the happy couple. What a lovely, lovely moment.
What's most upsetting about this scene is that Colin, who's affectionately known as Colin, my wife, Bridgerton, thanks to his obsession with being married to Penelope in the books, he first uses the phrase my wife to refer to Marina instead of Pen, so that's not great. So first of all, we had Polin's sacred April 6th meeting painted in episode 1, and now my wife has been taken from them too, so...
We can't have anything nice.
As the great Taylor Swift would say, this is why we can't have nice things. So just on that wonderful, wonderful note, we get Colin giving Marina a little relieved smile and he holds their joined hands up for everyone to see as everyone claps and cheers.
Cool, so let's do a quick costume analysis of Pain. So we've mentioned in previous episodes Marina wearing yellow and she's doing the same in this scene. So yellow is Pen's colour, come on, and she's wearing it while she gets engaged to the love of Penelope's life.
A ding, 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 ding. It is Beans coming to you from the cutting room floor. So I was thinking about something while I was editing. If y'all recall, in episode 105, the rewatch, Veg talked about Ellen Mirajnik, the costume designer for season 1, and how she used yellow to represent deviousness and deception. If you recall, as we talked about last episode, Marina is wearing yellow. Perhaps it's because she herself is being a little bit deceptive. Interesting. Just, something to sit on. Okay, back to the show.
Colin is wearing a lovely blue velvet.
He does look very good.
He does lose any costume points by breaking Pen's heart. There's also a big black ribbon on her dress, which our friends over on the subreddit once described as the black ribbon of mourning, as Penelope watches her hopes and dreams die in front of her. I think we're all with you there, Pen.
You know what I wonder? I follow, creative TikTok accounts where they do knitted lace. It's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, it's beautiful detailing. Mm-hmm. And talking of detail, I also want to draw attention very quickly to the way that this shot is set up, because I think it's very cleverly done. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this episode was directed by Julie Ann Robinson with Jeffrey Jar. So if you look, you have behind him, we've got Lord Featherington, and then you have Colin, Lady Featherington, Prudence, Philippa, Marina, Hyacinth, and Gregory. So as Colin holds Marina's hand up, Lord and Lady Featherington are on either side of him. So that's kind of symbolic of him asking for her hand in marriage, which he'd kind of forgotten to do up until that point. But what's interesting to remember is that they're not Marina's parents, they're Pen's parents. Colin is standing in the right place, but it's with the wrong person. And then if you move along the lineup, you've got Prudence and Philippa standing next to each other in kind of age order of the daughters. And then who is kind of placed next to them in that lineup within the frame? It's Marina standing in her yellow dress. So Pen isn't in that shot at all because she's kind of been usurped out of the family, and Marina's taken her place, not only in terms of Colin, but in terms of the family lineup and the sisters.
That's such a good detail.
And then lastly, to the right of Marina, just kind of next to her, you've got Hyacinth and Gregory. And at first I always thought it was a very random detail that they were there with the Featheringtons, but I kind of feel as though they're included in the lineup visually to remind us of the motivations that Marina has in marrying Colin. They even kind of foreshadow that Marina's going to have 2 kids, so she's going to have twins, going to have a boy and a girl, and they're standing there. So it's this big family lineup with this one drastically wrong missing piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's always really stood out to me.
Yeah, it's almost like a family picture picture and Pen's just off to the side of it, just outside of it.
In the editing, it cuts from Violet to Pen, and you can kind of see Violet's like eyes shifting, like she's looking at Colin and looks away. I wonder if there's like an indication that she looks over at Pen, just because the way that the editing is, you can see Violet's eyes like shift and then immediately cuts to Penelope looking upset. And I think that's kind of leading us to believe that maybe Violet will know. She won't maybe expect.
This kind of comes up later in the episode, but Violet definitely knows that something is wrong. I don't think she can quite put her finger on what is troubling her so much, but she definitely feels it's wrong, and I like that kind of detail of her almost like looking for the answer of what's wrong with the lineup. The rest of the family are kind of politely rushing up to congratulate them both, but you do have Violet and Anthony holding back a bit. They're both clearly reeling from the news. Anthony, never so good at concealing his emotions, is very clearly not happy, but Violet's kind of a bit more aware that they're in public, so they need to have this face together where, you know, they act as if everything's okay, and that's something that she reminds Anthony of as well. But Anthony continues to hang back, clearly still livid with what's just happened. And honestly, I don't think I've ever felt more spiritually connected to the Viscount than in this moment, because I'm right there with you, boy. I'm not happy either. So as we said, Anthony never one for kind of calmly processing his emotions, especially when it comes to his younger siblings fucking up. Leads us into our next scene. So we cut to Anthony barging into his study to furiously confront Colin, and he says, "You barely know the young lady. What on earth were you thinking?"
Colin has probably had a lot of these occasions because he was so young. When Anthony became head of the household, I'm sure he's used to being dragged into the office to be told off. He sat down, Anthony's looming over him. Colin's a kid in trouble at this point.
Do you think Anthony spends most of his day just cycling through, bringing various siblings into the room to shout at them?
Absolutely, probably loves it.
Yeah.
You know, we need to remember that Colin is actually a slightly unique position in the family where he's old enough to remember Edmund as the father and Anthony as his big brother. But when Edmund died, Anthony also became the father figure in Colin's life, and they kind of lost that or confused that kind of brotherly bond that they had originally. Whereas for the younger siblings, maybe they remember Anthony more as always being the father figure, or for Benedict, where he was always still the brother. Colin goes between needing his brother to be a brother and also needing that fatherly approval from him. And so it creates this really kind of difficult tension between them that we see across both seasons. And it's a bit unfortunate because Anthony often adopts the opposite role to whatever Colin needs in that moment. So, you know, if Colin is looking for the father figure, Anthony's maybe a bit too brotherly, or more often than not, it's maybe Colin is looking for the brother support and Anthony comes in too much like forceful father. And I think what we can tell is that Colin really genuinely seeks Anthony's approval, almost above anything else, I would say. I don't know, that's maybe a bit far, but I think he really, really covets that approval. And I think the issue that they have, especially at this age, is that Anthony sometimes tends to assume the worst from his brother, and then Colin goes super defensive. He also has the habit of going quite petulant when he's challenged by Anthony, which really doesn't help his case.
Yeah, so in this scene we kind of see Anthony challenging Colin, who ends up responding very childishly and says he knew that Anthony would respond like this and how little he would care to hear it, so that's why he never sought his approval before the engagement, which really doesn't help his cause, and it just kind of reinforces the idea that Anthony views Colin as a child. Colin argues that Violet seems perfectly happy because she congratulated them, though obviously she looked very upset when he made his announcement.
Anthony assumes that his brother has compromised Marina, and when he kind of throws that out there, he's like, I assume you've done that. We get, you know, one of our favourite Colin lines in response. Veg, do you want to do us the honours? Audiobook Colin?
Certainly not. I'm a gentleman.
I really do hope this comes back to bite him.
Oh, for sure.
And our good rake Anthony is very confused, because if Colin hasn't compromised Marina, then what other possible reason is there for his little brother to propose so young and so suddenly?
Why does anyone marry brother? For love, of course, and then kind of throws his hands to the side.
I love his little, for love, of course, as if it's the most obvious thing in the world. This really does show how naive and head in the clouds he can be, especially when it comes to his ideas of love. But where did he get it from as well? The idea that everyone marries for love, because that's evidently not true. I understand that he probably saw a very happy relationship with his family and with his parents. He should know that most people marry for convenience. So he does kind of get lost in his big ideals that he ends up probably getting a bit too caught up in and then trying to perform rather than feeling it.
I would kind of argue that Violet maybe raised her children to believe that they could marry for love. So maybe he isn't thinking that most people marry for convenience because his mom has always encouraged them to marry for love. And Colin, we know he's a romantic. So he may have been just waiting years to find his, storybook romance.
I've said this before. I don't think I've said it on the podcast, but I think I've said it to all of you before, that It's really interesting about Pen and Colin because I think you could argue they're the two most romantic or most believing in love on the show. But I think they're doing it in very different ways. I think Colin believes in love because he's been told and taught to believe in love. And he believes in that through that kind of having seen it and knowing that that's almost like his destiny, his family kind of legacy. Whereas Penelope believes in love, but not because she's ever seen it, but because she knows it from the way she feels about Colin.
Yeah.
They just come at it from such a different angle, just waiting to almost project that and to get that story started.
I also think he comes from a place of privilege, too. He doesn't need to marry for money. He doesn't need to marry for status or anything. So he has the privilege of being able to fall in love, where some people don't have that same luxury.
You know, it's also possible that Penelope's view of love was shaped by growing up with the Bridgertons and seeing the love in their family and wanting that. Not just her feelings for Colin, but seeing the Bridgertons and the love they have for each other.
Right.
Next year, when she's sort of looking for a husband for convenience, really, so she can be Lady Whistledown and be provided for and just get freedom from her family, do we think that is going to sort of come up and she'll tell him, you know, she's not marrying for love?
If he's like, I'll help you find a husband, what are you looking for? Surely he'll be like, surely you want to love someone. He'll be like, that must be the top of your list. And then she's going to turn and be like, no, I don't care about love. And he'll be baffled by that.
I think they are going to have that conversation because it will be a conflict between them, because Pen is going to be very rational and she has this list of she just needs a husband who she can live with, and he's going to just not agree with that, you know, and he'd want more for her, I think, too.
Yeah. If they do, I don't think it's necessarily going to be super straightforward. I don't think they will outright have a conversation. I feel like it'll be something where, like, Pen's suitor is serious about her, and he's just like, you don't love him. Like, why are you getting married to him?
That would be really sweet, where he just suddenly kind of realises. Yeah. Because I think he'd be devastated, and then he'll be eventually devastated to know the reason why she doesn't want to marry for love. But let's drag us back to reality, pull us out of our dreams like Colin, because Anthony is going to point out that Colin is still rather green and probably acting out of a desire to wet his wick, which is just the most wonderful euphemism. Thank you very much for that one, Anthony. Anthony puts the blame on himself here, so he's not even like that angry. He's like, it's all on me because I didn't take you to brothels once you left Eton. I think also Anthony probably saw his very sweet, sensitive brother and just couldn't quite bring himself to do it. Also, a little note that this means that I don't think Colin ever went to university like Anthony and Benedict did.
Question we're dancing around a bit.
Go for it.
And I think this is the scene in which it most directly comes up, so let's sort of address the elephant in the room. Do we think Colin has lost his V card?
I think he is, and this is why. Because unlike his brothers, we haven't seen him have these entanglements with other women in both season 1 and season 2. While we've been told that he's kind of a charmer and flirts with ladies, they haven't showed us that, and I think that's for a reason.
I mean, I'm more of like, I don't know, but I think that there is a good comparison in this actual episode. Or wait, maybe it was the last episode. I watched 5 and 6 today. Benedict, when he goes to the party, he like immediately sleeps with Genevieve. Marina tried to do the same thing, and Colin like was like, no, we can't do that. That's inappropriate. Colin just kind of didn't get it.
It's possible he's just inexperienced, if not a virgin, but their decision not to show him having these affairs with other women is, I think, deliberate,
And it's like, if he hasn't gone to a brothel, and if he won't get with someone in the town because of propriety, it's like, where are the opportunity? Which leads us, obviously, into his travels, which in the Regency era, the Grand Tour was kind of, part of that was going and getting experience. We know from season 2 that he didn't do anything on his travels.
I don't think he's going to be a virgin when he gets on with Pen.
I think you're right. I think up until season 2, maybe like a kiss, if that, because we saw how like deer in the headlights he was even when Marina was trying to do that with him. And I think the big question becomes between season 2 and season 3.
Yeah, I don't want him to gain his confidence from sex. That's so empty for me.
Yeah, I think we've seen that. I think he could be a new type of hero that we don't normally get to see in this kind of period drama, I think.
We should consider the fact that Netflix in season 1, I think they were the ones who gave the note that they wanted to cut out the scene from season 1 where Simon had a little tryst with Sienna in the first episode before he meets Daphne, and I don't think they're going to show Colin with another love interest before he focuses on Pen.
But, who knows? And you know what? Colin probably won't appreciate us speculating on his sex life because he doesn't appreciate his brother. And he kind of snaps and goes, you really are an ass, you know that. He kind of blaming the situation on Colin not sowing his wild oats. Again, thanks for the euphemism. But when Anthony refers to Marina as a chit, that kind of crosses the line and Colin jumps to his feet in anger. We know from next season that he does love a chance to defend someone's honour, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Dare I say it, this kind of echoes the way that he defended Penelope in 207. And Colin makes a pretty harsh dig at Anthony for not being able to fathom true attachment, which is not wrong, to be honest, as we see from season 2. Although Colin is kind of trying his best to act like a gentleman, defending his intended's honour, it doesn't come across to me as massively convincing, and I don't think it comes across to Anthony as convincing either, because he sighs and says, you're still a child, Colin. And again, that tension between the brothers, where one sees the other as just a child.
So if you think about the age difference here, Colin would have been 9 or 10 when Anthony became head of the family and moved from that brother role into more of a father role. So I wonder if Anthony still sees Colin as that baby brother, even though Colin is technically older than Anthony was at the time that Edmund died.
And I think maybe Anthony sees, almost is a bit jealous and resents him a bit for how free and unburdened he is, and he can just pick someone to marry, and it frustrates him that he's acting impulsively and sort of wanting to go travelling with no responsibilities when he can't do that.
That's true. Anthony wasn't able to do that.
And I think mostly he doesn't mind it. I think mostly he likes that he can look after his family, but in moments like this it kind of bubbles over a bit. Colin tries to resolve it. He says he's going to apologise to his mum, but he doesn't actually need Anthony's permission at all. Though he does say that he would very much prefer to have your blessing. He's not going to get it, is he, Lek?
No. So in this scene, Anthony refuses to give Colin his blessing and, quote, disappoints his brother by doing so. And just to hop on the speculation train for a second, I wonder if Anthony will give Colin his blessing in season 3 and surprise his brother by doing so, kind of bringing this full circle. This would be especially interesting if Anthony is aware of Pen's identity as Lady Whistledown at the time and accepts her anyway, because as we see later in the season, Anthony does seem to appreciate that Lady Whistledown has saved the family from, well, like, bigger scandals, because, you know, Pen causes the scandal, but she also lessens the blow to the family.
Yeah, that's a good point, because, you know, there's a moment that we said where Colin points out that he's actually older than Daphne, and Daphne's already married off, and Anthony's like, you're missing the point. It works differently for the two of you. And, you know, we'll get into this more next episode, but it's going to be a question where if, on the other hand, Anthony isn't as receptive or has some initial hesitation, is Colin going to have to stand up for him and Pen in a way that he didn't do with Marina? And finally, the title card for the episode rolls. The next morning, we get a very sheepish Colin who's stepping into the Bridgerton dining room, and he looks very much like a child who knows he's in trouble. So he cautiously approaches the table where Violet and various letters of the alphabet are all gathered together for breakfast. Hyacinth very tactfully declares that Colin's engagement has been written about in Whistledown, breaking the tension with a sledgehammer the way that only Hyacinth Bridgerton can do.
I'm just imagining Pen sitting down and writing this article, probably trying to make Lady Whistledown sound excited.
Do you think she was sobbing into her inkwell as she had to write all about it? Violet is very clearly upset with everything and she can't really look at Colin, so Benedict tactfully shepherds the rest of the siblings out of the room to give them some privacy. Shout out to Eloise, who has, I think, the best reaction in the entire thing, where she's got like this massive apple in her mouth and she's like looking at Colin like he's just in a David Attenborough documentary. Finally, he's alone with his mum and he takes a seat at the table. And did you notice exactly where he decided to sit? It was exactly where Gregory had been sat.
Interesting.
So not only is it a reminder of Colin's innocence and naivety in the situation, he literally takes a seat of his little baby brother, and it really reinforces how his family continues to perceive him too as a young boy.
Outfit moment. Colin's wearing a waistcoat that we saw last episode and we saw it in the third episode as well. This one, it's another reused sustainable
he looks almost identical to Gregory here, which is very noticeable when he ends up sitting in the same seat.
Interestingly, it's also a feather pattern.
Oh yeah, it kind of is. Yeah, I can see it.
So yeah, it's kind of emphasizing his connection to the Featheringtons, and there's a couple here. We have, you know, his connection to Pen, and also he's kind of tied to the scheme that Portia and Marina have concocted. So I wonder if this is an interesting way to convey through his costuming that he's kind of caught up in this scheme still.
Yeah.
He does keep wearing the same clothes. I'm getting a little bit concerned as to whether we need to go shopping for him. And, you know, I know he's a third born, but is he struggling that badly?
I mean, he might just not be into fashion.
We know he's not into fashion. Colin tries to break the awkward silence by kind of saying a slightly childlike, I did say I was sorry. And Violet tosses the Whistledown to one side, commenting that she should be thankful she heard the news from Colin before Lady Whistledown got hold of it.
This is actually kind of funny because poor Violet will suffer the same fate in season 3 because presumably Lady Whistledown will hear of Colin's next engagement first because she's the one he's going to be proposing to.
I don't know, that gives him a lot of credit, I think. I can imagine Penelope being the last to know that he's proposed to her. I'm interested to know what you think about the next little exchange where Colin tells Violet that he's been courting Miss Thompson all season, and he even says perhaps you were so taken up by Daphne you failed to see it, which is a bit of like a defensive dig at Violet, an insinuation that he feels overlooked in his family. I do agree that he's overlooked. It's not because they don't care about him. I just think they assume that he's always fine, kind of floating along in the background, getting on with his own thing. And, I think many people can identify with that feeling of no one's noticing that you're actually struggling because you're the type of person who's always fine.
This is also such a middle child thing, as the resident middle child.
Yeah, there's also this interesting parallel between Penelope and Colin because they're both kind of overlooked by their families, but in different ways. Mm-hmm. With Penelope, she's viewed a little more negatively in terms of her family, and they aren't as affectionate and they don't treat her well, whereas there's a lot of love in the Bridgerton family, but Colin probably just gets overlooked because there's so much chaos going on and there's so much of them.
It's also maybe one of those things where it's like, well, he's taken care of, so he's probably happy.
It does make me wonder if we'll see that sort of thing in Series 3 as well, like with Francesca debuting and marrying. Is that going to take up Violet again and distract her from Colin's drama?
Perhaps.
Because the audience knows that it's Colin's season, but I don't think Violet knows it's...
Yeah, Violet doesn't know that.
Violet's probably getting out of bed being like, season 6, fantastic, let's go, Francesca.
Like I said previously, I think Violet's going to have an idea, but I feel like her focus is going to be towards Francesca because it's another Bridgerton daughter debuting.
Yeah, so it's definitely something to consider, and I think there is something within Colin's opinion that he gets overlooked. But I do side with Violet a bit because Colin hasn't actually been courting Marina all season. There's a big period of time where he didn't even see her, and then he proposed, as we saw last week. He proposed completely out of nowhere. And Violet says that the family assumed he was flirting because he always flirts with girls.
So there's another reference to this later in the same episode, but yeah, they're tossing all these references to Flirty Colin out there. We haven't actually seen much of Flirty Colin, but they've told us quite a lot about him. Yeah, so we'll see if that's the swagger he returns with in season 3, if he comes back and is this flirtatious person that we've told he's been all along.
Violet is definitely troubled, and it's interesting you just said that because she points out that his relationship with Marina has caused a change. She says, I'm not sure I've ever seen you so solemn and serious, which again is insinuating that this pre-Marina Colin used to be very different, maybe more like the book Colin was like, with kind of being very fun and carefree. And Colin bounces back with a slightly infuriating answer. He says that no one ever takes me seriously except for Marina. And to that I'd just like to say, really? Is that the line you're going to go with, babe? No one else listening to your hopes and dreams, actively encouraging you?
This is a good point because Colin, he also so badly wants to be taken seriously and treated like an adult, and that probably factors into why he proposes to Marina in the first place. But then we see in season 2 like why he's been so affected by Pen's letters and her encouragement of his dreams and their discussion during the purposing, because she does take him seriously, and in reality Marina does not take him seriously. Pen very much does.
I think Luke Newton touched on this in the Inside Bridgerton book, where he said that he thinks he's drawn to the idea of not being like every other Bridgerton, as in Colin, distinguishing himself and not doing exactly what's expected of him. I think that's one of the appeals of Marina, and it sort of feels almost naughty, he said, and it matches his desire to be a man, so he doesn't feel like he's taken seriously, and Marina helps his sort of attempt to be seen as a man within his family, which does match with sort of what we've seen so far.
And again, as resident middle child, I tried so hard to be very different from everything my family did, just because I wanted attention. I think that all registers.
But because he's kind of performing that and trying to aspire to that, it's not really genuine to how he feels, and it does come off as more performative. And I think you get that in the scene with Anthony as well, where he's just kind of acting the part of this defensive partner and stuff. Do you think, this is kind of why Violet was so against it, because she could sense it wasn't true love?
No matter how Violet feels, we know she has a soft spot for Colin, so she kind of reaches out and takes his hand here and offers her support. She says she wasn't ready to let 2 of her children fly the nest so soon, but Colin reminds her that she will still have her hands full, especially with Eloise. Nice little dig there.
I was thinking today, does this remind anyone else of, do you know the Pride and Prejudice movie?
Yeah.
The Blessing, 2005.
2005.
Right at the end, where Mr. Bennet gives Lizzie his consent for her to marry Darcy, that little scene. This scene reminds me of that, because they approach it from a similar perspective where both Mr. Bennet and Violet are a bit confused as to why their kids want to marry, and they're a bit maybe cautious about it. But the difference ends up being that Lizzie is so clearly in love, like she's practically like bursting out of her in that scene where she's like telling her dad how she feels. And then I think Mr. Bennet realises from that she really does love Darcy, and he tells like, I heartily give my consent. And he says kind of a similar line to what Violet says, where I could not have parted with you to anyone less worthy. So he goes from being confused to fully endorsing it and fully supporting it.
Yeah.
Whereas here, Violet is confused and she doesn't see that kind of love bursting out from her son the way she expects him to. You know, I think that's part of the reticence and why she isn't able to fully support it, because she knows it's not true. And she knows that this isn't her son fully in love.
Right, because she doesn't say he looks like he's in love. She says he looks very serious.
Right. That's true.
And to be fair, Colin hasn't said he's in love.
Yeah, and with every other sibling that's been in love, she's been like, I see the way you guys look at each other.
So maybe when she sees that in season 3 with Penelope, she'll be able to more heartily like support the match, because I think she will notice that in them.
Yeah, because Colin will not be able to contain his emotions. I think once he realises how he feels, it will just be bursting out of him in that same way. So, leaving that lovely thought aside, we should probably pop over to see how Pen's doing, because she's having a bit of a shit time of it, isn't she? We're going to find her lingering in the doorway, classic Whistledown, as she listens to her sisters and Marina talking about Colin. And when Marina says that all their fortunes are about to change, Pen cannot resist jumping in and going, especially Colin's. And she's got this very like sickly, sweet, lethal kind of demeanour. She's absolutely fuming. And Marina's trying to placate her with a comment about how nice she looks. Pen isn't standing for a second of it, and she tells Marina, do not mock me.
I do like that line. It does make me laugh every time. She's got more of a confidence than normal and a sense of resolve, I think, that her anger sort of empowered her. So definitely excited to see that sort of side of her develop a bit, maybe in series 3.
Typically, anytime Whistledown gets a little bit upset, she gets a little bit more confident and feisty.
Yeah.
I hope she finds a balance. I don't know. I hope she learns how to cope a little bit better.
That's a good point, because this is almost like her retreating from the hurt and like channeling more into the Whistledown side of her, which is very sharp, very witty, but very scathing at the same time, which I think we see in this.
Yeah, and she's kind of bitter when she says, like, Marina counts on her continued silence.
Veg, I like what you say about maybe this is kind of what we're going to see, especially at the beginning of next season, when she is that hurt and angry, and it comes out as the lethal, very clever, but very savage Whistledown. Marina kind of tries to do some damage control, and she sucks up to Pen by saying, you know, you've been a true friend since I've arrived here, and I rely on your continued friendship and sympathy. Just as a quick aside, it's interesting that Marina is calling her Pen. She's the only other person besides Eloise and Colin to ever use her nickname, and she's using it here again to kind of manipulate her back on side and be like, I want you as my friend, Pen. But before the conversation can go any further, the cousins are interrupted because Marina has to go to the Mideast for her wedding trousseau. How lovely. Leaving Pen with her sisters. The two sisters are laughing about Colin not being the father, and Penelope jumps to his defence, telling them, do not laugh at him. She makes a fool of him already. And this is only adding to the conviction that what is happening to Colin is terrible. It's not only going to ruin his life and chance at love, but it's going to make him into a laughingstock, because people are going to figure out pretty quickly that he either compromised her or that he's not the father.
It's also just interesting to point out that the last time we saw Colin, he was pointing out that, you know, people don't generally take him seriously. And here we have Penelope taking him seriously and defending him to her sisters, even when he's not around to hear her.
Yeah, exactly. Take notes, Colin. We have a quick interlude over at the Mideasts, where the Bridgertons bump into the Featheringtons, and Portia is thrilled to invite them all over for dinner later that night to kind of celebrate that they're going to be together in a family forever. We're going to head back over to the Featheringtons' house, where the entire family are waiting for Marina at the bottom of the staircase. They're all kind of lined up, ready to go, and Penelope turns away at the sight of Marina, still trying to contain her anger, but it's kind of written all over her face. And Portia mentions that she's going to use the dinner to raise the issue of a swift wedding, and Pen kind of snickers to the side. She points out that it's not going to be easy to deceive Violet as it was Colin, because Violet's had so many letters of the alphabet as children, and she knows when she's being played. Pen gives this kind of very smug, sick, sweet smile as the flash of worry kind of crosses Portia's face, because, you know, normally a comment like that would probably get Pen told off by her mum, but I think that this kind of gets in Portia's head a little bit, and she knows there's truth to it, and she knows it's going to be hard to kind of pull off the plan at close quarters with Violet. And I think what Pen is doing here is just trying anything she can do to sow doubt and try and undercut the engagement, undercut the plan. But the truth is that she's drastically running out of time. And it is time for the engagement dinner from hell, I think we can call it. Let's all spare a prayer for Pen, who has to sit opposite Marina and Colin.
I don't know, I enjoyed myself.
Did you have a nice time at the engagement dinner?
Yeah, I had a lovely dinner. The food was nice. I liked the entertainment.
So, Veg, how are Pen and Colin shaping up at this wonderful dinner?
Outfit-wise, Pen's in pink. That's a preferred colour amongst Polin fans. And Marina's, interestingly, sort of more in yellow. It's more of a cream. Colin's dressed quite formally, sort of wedding attire almost.
I think this is one of his best looks, I'm going to say it.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's one of his better looks in my opinion, but I really think it looks very much like an outfit that Antony would wear.
Oh, that's a good observation.
We get one of my favourite and most relatable Penelope moments. Do you remember the bit where she has this completely dead look on her face? She's just watching everything and she just holds out her empty glass of wine, just waiting for it to be taken away and refilled. She knows that the only way she's going to get through that night is by being as drunk as possible, and we've all been there. Or we get a little bit of Pirate Colin popping up, shouting out when Violet tells Marina that it's long been Colin's greatest ambition to travel the world. And Marina kind of slightly gives an unconvincing answer that it is also now her greatest ambition. What a coincidence. And I wonder if this moment is the last straw for Penelope, where she kind of decides or starts to decide that she needs to take action, because we've seen how supportive Pen is of his travels the whole way through, and she knows how important they are to him, even if at the minute he's kind of forgotten that himself and lost his way a little bit with his hopes and dreams. And I think she knows she's got to listen to Marina pretend to care about his dreams and share his dreams, knowing full well that it's going to be game over for him once they find out that she's pregnant. Marina is sabotaging his future with her plan. She's not only taking away his chance at true love, she's taking away his ambitions, his plans that he's had. But Penelope is coming from a place of love, but I think she also knows, that, as we do as an audience, that he really doesn't deserve this happening to him. There's talk of the honeymoon, but Antony's shutting that down very quickly. Colin's clearly irritated by this, but he doesn't stand up to his brother. He lets it go and changes conversation with a little joke about embroidery to lighten the mood.
And Portia laughs at this to suck up, but Marina's letting out like a forced, delayed laugh. I don't think she finds him funny. But I don't find him funny either, in Marina's defence.
Do you want to go to a Benofi podcast?
I don't find him funny in general. I mean this joke in particular.
Well, it's hard to find anything funny in this scene, I guess.
I think he's just I think it's two things. One is highlighting that he's very young, and he thinks in order to impress the woman that he's trying to be with, he needs to be like, you're the best, I love you, you're the most perfect at everything that you do, you know?
While I don't find this particular engagement dinner very funny, I think that in general the Bridgerton-Featherington dynamic is very, very funny. Earlier when Portia even suggests this dinner, Violet really has difficulty schooling her expression and suggests that she has to ask Antony if it would be okay, you know? Do you really need Antony's approval, Violet? But anyway, this moment where Portia raises the subject of a swift wedding, I just think it would be hilarious if they include a callback to that in season 3 with Colin actually broaching the subject, taking everyone else by surprise by saying he wants to rush the wedding.
I would love if Antony was the one that goes, so how long is this engagement going to be? And Colin just answers, rather swift, I think. You know, that would be great.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of drama that could happen in the second half of season 3, and this could be like a real
moment of levity.
Yeah, because I mean, the characters are there for it, right? Because there's moments in here where like Violet and Antony are clearly not happy, and they're kind of like, I can't believe we're going to be related to these people. But what I think is even funnier is that through this marriage, they would have been related to them by cousins. Whereas Colin is like, I'll do you one better.
Yeah.
Let's make you more related than we're going to be. I just want a scene where it's just complete chaos and Colin is just sat in the middle, happy as anything.
Or Portia's like, oh, we should do like a combined family color. How do you guys feel about orange?
Oh, bless them. And, you know, fortunately, this dinner is at its end. But unfortunately, Prudence gives us a little rousing performance of, oh dear, what can the matter be?
Oh dear, what can the matter be? Oh dear, what can the matter be?
This is stunning. That was beautiful. So Colin's not a fan of this, and he ends up excusing himself from the room. There's this beautiful shot where Colin whispers to Marina, and they're like leaning in, and you can see Pen through the two of them, and she looks like she wants to commit murder. But this is her opportunity. I think she realises that this is one of the last chances she's got. So as he goes out into the corridor, she follows him.
A little poop.
Yeah, he's about to take a massive dump. He's like, you know what, Featherington?
Yeah.
He's like, let me just get myself acquainted with the house.
He does know his way around that house. Let's be honest, he's always there.
That's true.
And she asks if she can have a word, and he walks back saying, yeah, of course you can. He tries to have a little joke with her, but then I think he realises that she's deadly serious, and she tells him that she needs to talk to him about a delicate matter that she's been trying to speak to him about since the engagement was announced. And Colin immediately guesses that it's something to do with Marina, which is quite telling. Why did your mind immediately assume that was the reason? And Pen kind of just comes out with it. Kind of. She comes out with a version of what's happening. She says that Marina's heart belongs to another, and she tells him all about Sir George and their love letters that she's seen between them. She has misjudged him kind of once again. He's surprised her a lot with this entire situation with how he's acted. Colin's reaction is to smile fondly at her, just kind of reach for her arm and says, you really are very good, you know that?
Okay, so this entire night sucks. This conversation is painful, and Colin goes on to make some infuriating statements later in this scene about knowing his own mind and Marina's and how they both understand each other, yada, yada, yada. But Colin takes Pen's hand here, off-screen, sadly, and then he kind of looks up at her from under his lashes and says, you really are very good, you know that, in this, quiet, soft voice. It's not the Barb, but what a moment.
There's something about the way the scene is shot and the lighting.
It's romantic.
And it's like you say, this gorgeous moment where he reaches out, shouldn't do, but reaches out and takes her hand. I think on any other day of the week, any other situation, a moment like this, a sentence like that, a little bit of praise for Pen would have absolutely floored her and us, but this is not the reaction she wanted from him. As he's kind of looking really softly and affectionately at her, she just kind of stares at him with this, I don't know what's going through her head. I think she's just kind of exhausted at the fact that it didn't work. And she's like, what now?
Kind of lost.
And this is proof. A lot of people say that Pen is, there's a lot of Pen detractors, and they completely ignore.
They forget to bring this moment up, don't they? They say that she didn't reach out and tell him.
Yeah, they just conveniently forget it, and they think that she jumped from Pen and Marina first dancing to writing a Lady Whistledown column. And
she really was still considering Marina's reputation in this moment as well. Yeah. And just how important love is to her, because she said she's in love with somebody else, and really trying to tell Colin that you deserve to be with someone that loves you the way that Marina loves George.
Who could that be?
This is an interesting turning point, because earlier in this episode, Pen tells Marina that she would never betray her family.
Yeah.
And then this scene happens, and she doesn't get the reaction she'd hoped, and she goes on to betray her family for Colin's sake.
Yeah.
And I think it gets brought up as a reason to criticise her decision. And she's not perfect, and she makes a very messy decision at the end of this. But, why did she not tell him everything? Is it because, she's young and naive and didn't know how to bring that conversation up? Is it because she maybe didn't want to ruin Marina? Or is it even that she suspects that if Colin knew, he'd still go through with it?
I think that it's probably a combination of all three.
And it's that kind of question of, is it right to take someone's autonomy away from them? I think she does it in a messy way that has long-lasting impacts on everyone that's involved in the situation. Colin says that he knows his own mind and he knows Marina's because they understand each other. And it's a really sad moment. I know that you can pick at Colin for a lot of things and joke with him about it, but it is really sad, this scene, because he's believing in a lie. And we know that the fallout of this will eat away at his self-confidence. And Marina kind of walks into Holt at that moment and pulls Pen away from Colin. And regardless of whether she should have said more or not, she can't. That moment is broken. Pen kind of leaves to go back, and there's this really interesting moment where Colin looks at her as she's going and gives her a really lingering look. And I think there is some part of him deep down that knows that there's something more, or that they didn't leave the conversation at the moment that they should have done. Marina walks up, she sighs, and Hero Colin is activated. He asks if anything's wrong, assumes it's Anthony, and Marina kind of feigns this distress at how she's been treated by his family, and that they're refusing to accept her. And he tells her, I am your family now. We shall make our own family, you and me. And it really bugs me that Marina kind of tries to drive a wedge between him and his family. It's clear that they mean everything to him. And here you've got him saying, we're going to make our own family away from them.
Yeah, Marina has no problem with the idea of Colin abandoning his family, whereas I think Pen, in this episode, she does make sacrifices to ensure that she does not negatively impact Colin or pull him away from his family. And I think we will maybe see something like this in season 3. We've kind of speculated that Pen might refuse his proposal or perhaps call things off with Colin at some point. And it's possible that she does this because she wants to protect him and the Bridgertons, especially so as not to repeat the situation with Eloise and Lady Whistledown in season 2.
I think Marina has proven that she knows how his mind works very well, in a way that I think Pen has kind of misjudged him a lot in this entire situation. You can't really blame Colin for wanting to believe in what she's saying. And what's worse is that the way she leads this conversation is that she ends up making it so he thinks he's suggesting Gretna Green and that it's his idea to marry quickly, when actually last episode he thought it was romantic to have a long engagement. And so he's now been led into like, oh, I've got a perfect solution. This is my idea. I'll lead the way. And I think that it's something like this that adds to the eventual damage, where he takes far too much blame for the situation. And he's worried that she hates the idea of Gretna Green, but Marina says she loves it. And then she says she loves him. And it's this awful, heartbreaking moment, because he lights up and you can tell that that's what he wants. He just wants someone to care for. And I think it's awful to see how that's used against him here to make him a bit of an unwitting participant in ruining his own life. And that's kind of part of what Penn is trying to save him from.
If you're a Polin fan looking how to survive this scene, Colin doesn't return the sentiment here.
He never does he? He never says that he loves her, which I think is that deep part of his psyche that's buried very deep down with those letters to Penn. I think he does know that he never loved her. So whilst Colin's off happily planning a trip to Gretna Green.
Side note, history fact, would take 3 to 4 days by horse and carriage to get to Scotland. In the 1700s, it would have taken like 10 days.
Did horses get quicker?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm assuming roads.
Oh yeah, maybe more time.
Oh yeah, probably.
But yeah, whilst he's off planning his trip, Penn is spending the next day in her bedroom, lost in thought. Portia walks in to say that, you know, they're supposed to be going for dinner, but Penn is feigning an illness to get out of it because she has got shit to do. Penn has got a plan and she enacts it the second that Portia and everyone leave. So Penn jumps up, she gets to work in Marina's room searching for letters from George. She finds them eventually and then pulls them all out to the floor. She realises something pretty crucial about these letters and she decides to wait for Marina to return so she can tell all and finally stop this entire situation because it's all going to work out beautifully.
First of all, props to Polly Walker for the hilarious face Portia makes when Penn feigns her illness in this scene. She's just completely disgusted. But a little detail I like in this scene is that Penn, while she's searching for George's letters, she looks under Marina's pillow. And earlier in the season, we saw that Marina kept her love letters in bed with her under her comforter, but now she's kind of shoved them away in a hidden drawer.
Oh, I love that, how open she was with Penn to start with and still in that kind of romantic frame of mind, and then she retreats away from that and hides. And Marina appears and she's pretty angry that Penelope's been searching through her belongings. But Penn is really excited by what she's found. She's like, this is the solution. Everything's going to be fine again. That magical, happy fairy tale is going to all work out. Colin's going to be safe because it turns out that the last letter from George was a fraud and that he never denied Marina or their child. But with tears in her eyes, Marina insists that it doesn't change anything. George has still abandoned her. He hasn't replied to any of her letters. Even if this letter is a fraud, he's still kind of ghosted her. Penn's really confused because she thought Marina loved him and she's very quick to clarify, George, I thought you loved George. But Marina insists it changes nothing. And then to Penn's horror, she burns the letters from George. You know, that's kind of that final, we've seen in the series how those letters really represent sort of a naivety and a real belief in love and that everything will work out for Penn. And then that literally goes up in flames for both her and Marina. And at the same moment, Penn realises that Marina's bag is packed and there's suddenly this panic where she realises that her and Colin are going to Gretna Green. And this is it. It's kind of the most desperate moment that it's going to get. Penn is running drastically out of time and she turns to Marina and says one of her most famous lines, but what of him? What of Colin? And this is it, guys. Finally. And she understands what's actually been going on this entire time, that Penn is in love with Colin. Marina tells Penelope that she knows so much more of Colin, of the world, than Penn does, and she says, if I am to be the executioner of this childish infatuation, then so be it. Your love is an unrequited fantasy. Do those words ring any bells for anybody?
We've already touched on this, but this language really makes me think that we will see Colin dreaming or fantasizing about Penn in season 3.
For Colin, the language of fantasies will come actually from Marina herself when he goes to visit her at Romney Hall. She tells him that he is a boy caught up in his own fantasies, just as she's telling Penelope here that she's a child caught up in her own infatuations. Whereas Colin, obviously, has his famous scene in 208 where he also references dreaming and fantasies when he's rejecting Penelope. I mean, we've tried to sympathise with Marina a lot throughout the series because she's been put in a very difficult position the whole way through.
So, yeah, I think Marina is sort of thinking practically at this point, and she's sort of gone about it in the wrong way, but in the same way that Penn probably feels like she's rushing towards the finishing line, trying to stop things. Marina is so close to having everything sorted out, and she's got freedom and safety within her grasp.
Yeah, she's at a desperate point as well, where she needs to get this over the line.
Yeah, exactly.
She is pushed to an extreme here. I think they're both in extreme points. it's a brutal way that Marina goes about it. To get what she needs in this scene, she has to kind of break a part of Penelope. There's a part of Penelope that is that sort of dreamer, the same way that Colin is, that sort of idealist who believes in love and happy endings. And Marina knows that that's the part that she needs to target right now to stop Pen and to help Marina kind of achieve her aims. So a devastated Penelope kind of leaves, and the camera lingers on this really beautiful moment. I love how Ruby Barker plays it, where it just kind of lingers on her face. And I think that's what's important. I think Marina didn't enjoy breaking Penelope's spirit and breaking her heart. I think it's very revealing of her character and the position that the two of them have been driven to, from the friends that they were at the beginning to kind of the extremity that they've both been pushed to.
A little moment of levity here before our next scene. There's a scene at the printer shop where they see them getting the next issue of Lady Whistledown ready. And I'd like to point out one of our favorite little known characters, the printer who wears a paper hat of printed papers, who really gave Colin's biscuit cushion a run for money in our random object game on the Polin subreddit.
Did you know that was entirely historically accurate? They did make themselves little hats out of the paper. I don't know why. And so yeah, we have the printer who wears a paper hat of printed papers to thank, because he is busy getting the next edition of Lady Whistledown ready to be delivered. A bit of a rush job, I believe, a bit of a last minute, and we get her voiceover telling us, Lady Whistledown, are you with us?
Oh yeah, I am. All is fair in love and war, but some battles leave no victor, only a trail of broken hearts that makes us wonder if the price we pay is ever worth the fight. The ones we love have the power to inflict the greatest scars.
And we find ourselves in the back garden of Bridgerton House, where we've got Eloise sitting all alone on her swing. She's quite contemplative, and she looks out and sees Penelope walk through the garden gate.
I cried here.
Is this the moment, Beans, that broke you?
This is when I cried. Yep, this is when I cried.
I mean, it's very understandable, because we've got to remember that they haven't made up yet. We get this moment where they look at each other and Penelope just absolutely breaks down. Did that break your heart?
Pen knows the weight of what her words are going to do. She's very aware of the responsibility that she has, and she knows what this is going to do and the implication that it will have. And I think she's devastated for the loss of her relationship with Marina, because she was incredibly close with Marina. You know, the hit that it's going to take on her own family, and, you know, the hit that it's going to take on Colin. Is love worth this?
And it's like Whistledown just said, which obviously is Penelope herself. It's all fair in love and war, but some things just leave broken hearts behind them. And, you know, is it worth the decisions you make for the outcome? And it's like you say about how close they were. She says the ones we love have the power to inflict the greatest scars. And I think that goes in every direction in this situation. I think that goes from Marina to Pen, Pen to Marina, Marina to Colin. She ran out of time, and this was the decision that she made. And Beans, what you just said, that's a good point, because on the first time that you watch this, before you know who Lady Whistledown is, you would assume that she's crying over Colin, because we think that she's had a heart broken by Marina, it's over, she's lost Colin. But when you rewatch it, you realise that Penelope was the one who directly exposed Marina, and the entire meaning of this scene is flipped on its head. And it's not really about Colin anymore, because she's still hurt about the situation, but through her actions she's made him safe. In a way, he kind of gets put to one side, and this is her pain over exposing Marina. And as we said, that's reinforced by what Lady Whistledown says in the actual pamphlet itself. I think it's comparable to how upset Penelope was in 207 when she exposed Eloise. And I think it really shows that sometimes people act as if Penelope enjoys these decisions and enjoys ruining people's lives. She certainly doesn't enjoy ruining Eloise's life or Marina's life. And I think the weight of that is very, very heavy on her here. She can write under pressure and gather information under pressure, but if she's forced into a decision by someone else, she tends to make her messiest mistakes, I think.
I also think that this is a really good psychology lesson in intentionality and action. When we think of something that we do, a decision that we make, we think of our intentions behind it. We're thinking about an action that somebody else does. We don't think about the intentions that they have. So I think Penelope has to better express, like, these are my intentions and this is why I've made this action. It still doesn't mean it's going to be okay or it's going to be right, but I think it is important that she communicates those things in the future.
Just going back to Elle, what we see here, what I absolutely love about the way that this scene is played between them both, is that Eloise immediately runs to Penelope, no matter what's happened between them, no matter the background that, they've been falling out. It's this moment, and I think it's that true essence of a friendship, even if a friendship is under strain, where your best friend needs you in that moment, you'll be there for them. And, I think this is universally, I think everyone can agree that this is the worst thing Penelope ever does. Was there another option for her? Possibly. Could she have gone over to the Bridgertons and told them directly? Possibly. I think the fact is that she ran out of time. There wasn't a perfect solution for her to pick in that moment. And she didn't pick, if there was, she didn't pick it. And it's like she wrote in Whistledown, some battles leave no victor. And that's what happens the next morning as that issue is delivered. Lady Whistledown is speaking of the sacred bond between man and wife, and the edition is passed around all over town. And we go to Bridgerton House, where we've got Violet anxiously waiting at the bottom. It's very early in the morning. Colin is quietly slipping down the stairs. He's on his way to Gretna Green to get married, but at the second he sees Violet's face, I think he knows that something's gone terribly wrong. Violet hands him the paper. This is it. This is the moment he learns that a grave fraud is afoot. She's with child, and she has been from the very first day she entered the city. There's something like gut-wrenching about the way he drops his bag. I know that's really silly to say, but like that kind of like shock. And we go over to Featherington House, and we have the same scene completely mirrored, where Marina's coming down the stairs with this kind of like look of excitement and happiness and relief on her face. She's also got a bag in hand. Portia's there, and Portia has this look of game over, girl. And the last thing we hear from Lady Whistledown is that desperate times call for desperate measures, but I will wager many will think her actions beyond the pale. Perhaps she thought it was her only option, or perhaps she knows no shame. But I ask you, can ends ever justify such wretched means? And my last thought gives to you from this very long, very miserable episode is, obviously in that paragraph, Lady Whistledown is talking about Marina within the show. But what I think is clever is that those words are also being used for the audience to describe other situations in the episode. So I think that's referring to what Penelope ends up doing, which we eventually retrospectively realise is her actions. And then also, we haven't mentioned the entire main plot of the episode. I really like the way that they choose to use one situation to narratively talk about
multiple subplots.
Multiple subplots. And I think maybe, is this how we're going to see it in season 3? Because is she always going to be writing about her own love life with Colin, or is what Whistledown writes going to be about, I don't know, maybe Francesca and John on the surface, but used to then comment on other situations too?
I bet they'll do that for sure.
But that is kind of the end of the episode. That was a massive episode. It was a messy episode. The elopement is off, don't worry guys. We're not going to Gretna Green next week, as much as we'd love to. Joys, we'll see what waits for us next time. Lecky, that was a monster of an episode. We have some whistle downs. Do we have a whistle up?
Well, I mean, you kind of have to ignore the entire conversation surrounding it, but the whistle up for this week is the scene where Colin takes Penelope's hand, looks up at her from under his lashes, and says, "You really are very good, you know that."
Oh, it's a good line though, isn't it? And I think he's got a bit of praise kink, and I think Pen maybe does too in other situations, so I think...
Listen, I went to the Ren Fair this weekend and everybody kept saying, yes, lady, and I was like, I get praise kinks. I get it. I love this.
Is there a whistle down?
It's the engagement announcement. Like Pen, I also wanted to wrap a funereal black ribbon around myself to commemorate the proceedings.
I think on this episode cover, we just need like a black ribbon around us to mark that we're in mourning for this entire situation. How are we rating it?
I think we can all be agreed.
Yeah, 12 out of 12.
I do not agree.
Oh,
okay.
On that cheery thought, is the end of the episode. Next week's a bit, I don't know if it's a bit lighter, but it's maybe not as relentlessly miserable. And so we'll see you next week, where we'll be breaking down episode 1, season 7, which is called Oceans Apart, right?
Something like that.
It's called something, you'll know. But in the meantime, where can everyone find us, Lex?
You can find us at whatabarbpod on Instagram and TikTok.
and you can find us over on reddit.com/r/Polin Bridgerton. See you there!
Take it away, Beans.
Das violin. Do 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 do.